Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete the first episode in our Ice Sheet Survival series with Rimworld version 1.0 because after many alpha and beta versions the game is officially out of early access and it has finally been released on Wednesday. Now, compared to Beta 19 that we played in the previous few episodes, version 1.0 doesn't change all that much. This final update mainly contains a few bug fixes and a few smaller additional functions here and there. However, there is one new mechanic that I really like, and that is that we can now manage food restrictions for all of our colonists. So we finally have the option to tell our colonists what they are allowed to eat, which was previously only possible using mods. And you can see I have already set things up for Cambiar and Cobra. Cobra will be allowed to eat meals of any kind, but big change, no more pemmican for him, and this also makes sure he doesn't eat rice or raw meat. For Cambiar, meanwhile, the setup looks almost identical. The only difference is that I have also allowed Cambiar to eat raw human meat, because, well, we have some in storage and it always gives him a nice mood boost. And with that, we are set to jump into today's episode, and with temperatures out on the ice sheet getting colder and colder, we need to get Cambiar some protection. In the last episode we crafted some toques, Cobra is already wearing his, and Cambiar will now follow suit, even though it means taking off his Masterwork Marine helmet. Don't worry though, should things get serious and we're facing some heavy combat, then we will of course switch back to the helmet again. For the moment though, it only causes Cambiar to feel cold, and that results in an unnecessary mood penalty. After a bit of research, we now continue things with a round of butchering. And no, even though our meat supplies are running low, I'm not talking about animal corpses this time. With Cobra fast asleep, Cambiar will butcher some human corpses. Still, even though Cobra is sleeping, this will result in a few penalties. However, thankfully they are not too severe and they also do not stack. In the social tab here we can see a -10 penalty for butchering human-like corpses, as well as a -5 penalty for eating them, but in the grand scheme of things that doesn't really change Cobra's and Cambiar's relationship much. In the needs tab we can then see a -6 mood penalty for Cobra, and that penalty will last quite a while, 6 days in total, but as you can see here, even with a second corpse butchered it does not increase, and so all in all the penalty is once again relatively small and should not be cause for concern. And now that we have a decent amount of human meat, we will also change Cambiar's food restrictions one more time, and we will forbid him to eat any kind of prepared meal. And the reason for that lies in the different mood bonuses, as fine meals give a tiny +5 bonus, while raw human meat gives, even with all penalties applied, a bonus of +13. So this is now an easy way to keep Cambiar's mood in check, and it also reduces the workload for Cobra, who now does no longer have to prepare as many meals. Cobra, by the way, has also switched headgear. Since the marine helmet was lying around, he promptly grabbed it, but once it gets too cold that will also not offer enough protection, so we will make sure he goes back to the toque immediately. Then it's time to harvest as Cambiar heads off to bed, and as night falls across the ice sheet we are entering the final day of autumn. Now at this point let's talk about Tainted apparel. These are the clothing items that we grabbed off our dead enemies, and in previous versions of the game they had at least some value. While wearing them was almost always not a good idea thanks to the mood penalty, they could still be collected and then sold off to traders. That mechanic, however, seems to have been reworked as traders no longer buy Tainted apparel. And that results in all of these clothing items becoming pretty much worthless. I don't want Cambiar and Cobra to wear them, we cannot sell them, and since they only take up space in the storage room, let's get rid of them. For that purpose I have created a small stockpile outside, where our Huskies can now carry all the things, and since the stockpile is completely unprotected, the items should quickly deteriorate and eventually rot away and disappear. On the next morning then, Cobra has finished harvesting and is resowing plants while Cambiar is researching, and we have our first event of the episode, a crashed transport pod with an injured survivor inside. Now the notification also informs us that Hornet here is a member of the Blue Rock Nation, but that doesn't make her any less intriguing. Her skill set here looks absolutely formidable. I could see her as a great help researching and training animals, and the traits are also not too bad. Masochist even provides her with mood bonuses when she's injured but doesn't offer any downsides. Misandrous then might be a bit of a problem since both of her colonists are male, but Nimble then makes up for that and should make Hornet an excellent melee fighter. Injury-wise, we're also not dealing with anything too horrific here. There are no permanent scars here to limit her in any capacity, so I would say let's start a small rescue mission. Now our first priority here is to get the wounds bandaged up, and so we're putting down just a small medical sleeping spot right next to where Hornet crash landed. Cambiar now comes running and carries her over to that spot, but since she's bleeding heavily and we probably don't have time to run back and grab medicine, we'll try to bandage the wounds without. Alright, here we are, the bleeding is stopped and Hornet is out of immediate danger. However, she's still in pain shock and the hypothermia is also getting serious. So, phase 2, let's get her into something warmer, and with the hydroponics farm we have the perfect room for that already. So we'll put another medical sleeping spot down there, then we'll remove the one that she's currently in, and have Cambiar carry her over to the new one. And here we are, Hornet is in a nice warm environment, but now Cobra is giving us trouble. Being up too long and inside a fairly ugly environment has given him a few hefty mood penalties, but thankfully he's already working on that by playing some hoopstone. So back to Hornet, who despite being in safe temperature has suffered some frostbite on the way here. Her hypothermia is thankfully going down, but she now definitely needs some additional medical attention. Alright, here we are, everything is tended to. With quite a few wounds sustained, her masochist trait should keep her happy for the next few days, and the hypothermia is also becoming less and less of an issue. So now we'll only have to wait and see whether or not she decides to join us, or whether she prefers to return to her original faction. The next few hours then go by without much trouble. With a bit more food in storage, we now have to increase our material stockpile in the kitchen, but that's about all that happens, at least until Hornet gets hungry. Now, I was trying to feed her only with raw rice, simply because I didn't want to waste meals, but for some reason that wouldn't work. The game always told me there were no resources available, and so eventually I gave in and switched her over to Cobra's meal plan. So here we can see Cambiar feed her a fine meal, and despite all of her efforts, the misandrist trait still shows its effects, as Hornet currently sees Cambiar as a rival. Now we'll have to see whether or not that changes over the next few days. Maybe once Hornet is able to have a conversation again, the two of them can talk out their differences. For now, we once again jump ahead a few more hours. It is now late evening and time for some more butchering. This time, however, Cobra will do the deed, and the corpses will only be a few Arctic wolves. As I mentioned, our meat reserves are fairly low at the moment, so low in fact that Cobra can no longer make fine meals, so let's get a bit more meat going here, just so he has enough to cook with for the next few days. Now once again, a few more hours pass by, and at midnight we are officially in winter. Cobra spends his night cooking and cleaning, and then in the early morning hours we have some good news regarding Hornet, whose injuries have healed to the point where she is now no longer incapable of walking. She remains in her sleeping spot for the time being though, probably waiting until her injuries are all fully healed. Cobra then serves breakfast as the morning arrives, but interestingly enough we can see that light levels do not change much. This seems to be another change that came in either Beta 19 or version 1.0, because winter out on the ice sheet now remains mostly dark even during the day. As you might have been able to see, we only get a tiny amount of power from our solar panels, but for the next 15 days we'll mostly have to rely on the geothermal generator and on the wind turbines. After a bit of training work with the Huskies, Cobra now spends some time with Cambiar in our common room, and we can soon see the effects of the light changes, as a few of our electrical devices have already begun shutting down. Especially for the hydroponics farms, that is of course a problem. After all, if they remain without power for too long, the plants inside will die. For now, the tiny amount of light we have is just enough to keep them operational, but we'll likely need to figure out a solution soon. And that solution comes just a few hours later by prioritizing plants over research. We are shutting off the research bench and the multi-analyzer now, which should hopefully free enough power to keep the hydroponics farms going. And with power consumption reduced to a minimum, it is now time for some manual labor. You never know when the next building project comes around, and so let's have Cambiar make a new batch of sandstone blocks. In the late afternoon then, it starts to snow and light levels drop even lower, and with that, power problems are also back on the menu. So we will now shut off absolutely everything we don't need. As far as I know, there are only 3 electrical devices left running in the base, and those are the comms console, the orbital trade beacon, and a single lamp in the common room. I hope that's enough to keep the hydroponics farm going, otherwise we'll have to get a bit more creative. Late at night then, Cambiar finishes making stone blocks and heads off to bed, while Cobra has harvested a bit and is now taking a cleaning break because half of the plants are not fully grown yet. As he then heads back to haul the rice, we have Danger arrive on the ice sheet, this time in the form of 2 mechanoid lancers. However, just like numerous times before, our defenses should be more than capable of dealing with them, we just need to make sure they take the right path. For that purpose, we'll quickly use Cobra to close one door and then open another. This should force the attackers to walk across a large number of traps, and from experience they normally don't withstand more than 1 or 2 blows. Alright, here they come, the first attacker is in and down shortly after, and a few seconds later number 2 suffers the same fate. That is another raid fended off, and since it is night and the sun lamp is not consuming any power, Cobra has used the time to make some meals and can now head back to the defenses to open and close doors again. Afterwards he can then continue harvesting, but since power is indeed becoming a bit of a problem, we will reduce our hydroponics output for a while, and we'll do so by shutting off 3 of the hydroponics basins. At the moment we have enough rice in storage, and with Cambiar and the Huskies consuming human meat, we should not run out anytime soon. With more parts of the harvest brought in, Cobra now heads off to bed, and in the afternoon I tried researching a bit with Cambiar. Unfortunately though, wind was pretty much non-existent during that time, and so the experiment didn't last long. To make up for it then, 2 good news at the same time. We see Husky mother Ruby is once again pregnant, and Randy Random also gifts us a silver meteorite, which we can now mine and increase our colony wealth by a substantial amount. For today, Cambiar only gets 1 block of mining done before heading back to the base to get some sleep, but this will definitely be a good project to keep him occupied for the next day. Back at the base, meanwhile, night has once again set across the ice sheet, and just like last winter, our Huskies are suffering from hypothermia. Temperatures have way surpassed their minus 50-degree threshold, and so we now have no other choice but to flick on the heater to keep them warm. Now, I briefly thought about moving them to the hydroponics farm as well, but that would have left the place a bit crowded and the Huskies without access to food. This way we can simply tell them to stay put inside their room and haul a few corpses over there, which should be enough to keep them going throughout the winter. Admittedly though, it would be good to get rid of that hypothermia problem at some point down the line, because feeding a growing group of hauling animals that cannot haul for a quarter of the year, that doesn't really strike me as overly efficient. Now all the corpses have been hauled over, and it is once again time to feed our lovely guest Hornet. As you can see, she's doing pretty well at the moment, her recovery is going smoothly, and I think she should be up and running within the next 1 or 2 days. Cobra now goes to sleep and we can jump over to Cambiar, and yes, it is the middle of the day and still almost pitch black out on the ice sheet. That will not stop Cambiar from continuing his mining expedition though. The silver here is just too valuable to be left alone, and since Cambiar is a pretty high level miner, he should hopefully be able to clear out the entire meteorite block here before he grows too tired. Alright, here we are, late evening, and Cambiar has completed his task. He is now hauling 500 units of silver back to the base, and roughly 90 are still out here. Back in the base, meanwhile, Cobra is harvesting some more rice, and I think that reduced hydroponics setup we have going on at the moment should be enough to keep us going for the next few days. As Cambiar then heads off to bed, we have another good event happen. A Psychic Soothe provides a plus 16 mood bonus for all of our colonists. I imagine that's a slight relief in the somewhat monotone darkness. Cobra meanwhile spends the night heading out on the ice sheet to grab the remaining silver. After all, we don't want anyone else who passes by to get their hands on it. As Cobra then returns, we have at least a mild breeze going on, and that is enough to quickly fire up the stove again and to get our meal supplies back on track. Then, with Cambiar ready to go again, winds are picking up speed, and accompanied by hard snow, our wind turbines are for a change producing a decent amount of electricity. And of course we will not let that opportunity go to waste, instead we'll have Cambiar fire up the research bench immediately. However, our attention is now taken by Hornet, who after good care in our hydroponics farm has finally fully healed. And apparently she has decided not to join us, instead she's now moving, apparently looking to return to her faction. However, as you can also see, she's moving at a pretty slow pace, and we still have freezing cold temperatures outside, so to be honest, I doubt she's going to make it very far. And yep, here we are, barely outside of her defenses and accompanied by a beautiful Aurora. Hornet collapses, and we can now rescue her again. Maybe this will convince her that joining us is the best option she has at the moment, although unfortunately I have my doubts about that. Still, if all else fails, this is at least a great way to train Cambiar's medicine skill. Right, and Hornet does indeed seem fairly determined here. Just a few minutes after being rescued and with the hypothermia not even worn off, she once again gets up to leave, and honestly at this point I have a feeling we'll not be able to do much about that. And yes, here we are, she is down once again, and as much as it pains me, I don't want to spend the next few days just running after her. We certainly have quite a few more important things to take care of, so if she so desperately wants to get herself killed out in the cold, then by all means we'll let her die of her own stupidity. A short while later then, the Aurora has ended, and very fittingly, as darkness once again sets across the ice sheet, Hornet also leaves us. The hypothermia took care of her quickly, and she will now serve a purpose as food for the Huskies. I hope we don't get a relationship penalty for that with her faction, which might be the very ironic icing on the cake in this scenario. During Hornet's attempts to get away, the winds out on the ice sheet have unfortunately subsided again, and so at the moment we just have enough to flick on the machining table, which we will now use with Cobra to disassemble all of our mechanoid corpses. This will as usual give us a few materials, but either something has been changed in the latest update or Cobra is simply not as good at the task, because the amount of materials we get here vary a bit from mechanoid to mechanoid. Still, we can increase our reserves of steel plus steel and components, and at the moment we definitely have enough of all of those. So, since we still have power problems, we're now queuing up the next project for Cobra, and this one only requires a bit of power for the lamp, and also a lot of sandstone because Cobra is going to make a new sculpture. I would say there is always room to beauty up the place, and admittedly with the rice still growing we also don't have much else to do at the moment. Still, with Cambiar awake we are now risking it. We are also going to flick on the multi-analyzer and the research bench, and with winds picking up again we should hopefully be able to get a few good hours of research in. Researching, by the way, is probably also our best solution to the problem, because our current research project is the ship reactor, which would indeed be a very good source of power. As you can see though, it will take us quite a while until we have that researched, and even then it requires large amounts of uranium and advanced components, so I'm 99% certain that winter will be long over by the time we have built one. While we're researching then, another event, and it is another crashed transport pod. Inside we have Duke, a space marine without faction affiliation, and he once again looks fairly intriguing. He is a very skilled fighter, although incapable of medical and social work, but he also has two very nice traits in kind and fast walker. Chemical fascination could of course be a bit of a problem, but just as long as we have any sort of drugs in our base. However, I normally try to trade them away quickly, so if we're careful, this trade should not become a huge issue. However, despite all the positives, in the end I still had to let him go. His injuries are severe and he is far, far away from the base, so even if Cambiar was quick enough to stop the bleeding, he would probably still lose a few limbs to hypothermia, of course if it doesn't outright kill him. On top of that, the need for a capable fighter is not super huge at the moment, especially with the limited amount of colonists we have. I like to let our defenses take care of things, so at the moment we don't desperately need a super soldier frontline fighter. Instead, what we need, that is a bit more comfort for Cambiar. Just like sculpting, researching requires a lot of sitting around, and I think it's time we give Cambiar an upgrade underneath his butt. So the steel stool at the table gets removed, the steel dining chair from the research bench moves over there, and in its place we will construct another blue fur armchair. However, just before the construction work can begin, Cambiar gets food poisoning. Yes, for him that is the only downside of eating raw human meat. The chance is only 2%, so it's definitely a risk I'm willing to take. But since food poisoning has been made sufficiently worse in Beta 19, Cambiar will now suffer quite a bit. And yes, the sickness also reduces his ability to build things, and so as he botches the construction work here, some valuable resources are being wasted. Still, we will have him try again. Luckily Cambiar heads off to bed soon after, so the rest of the work can now be finished by Cobra, who is also a fairly decent construction worker. And here we are, a normal blue fur armchair is finished, so that should make Cambiar's research sessions a lot more comfortable. Cobra himself also gets comfortable as he continues with the small sculpture, and it actually doesn't take him long until that's finished. Even better, he produced one of excellent quality, so while I first put it in Cobra's bedroom, plans changed quickly. As you can see, the sculpture has a phenomenal beauty rating of 165, far surpassing the value of 34 provided by our poor quality sculpture in the common room. So the two sculptures now switch places to give the boost to both colonists. And here we are. I think our common research and dining room is now the most beautiful place in the base, while the bedrooms of Cobra and Cambiar are also both decently pretty. In the early morning then we have another trader arrive, and since Cambiar is still sick and suffering from food poisoning, we will have to let Cobra handle this one. As you can see here, Cambiar's talking skill is significantly reduced at the moment. Alright, first things first, the steel stool that we removed from the table is now no longer needed, and we can therefore sell it. However, my real item of interest is this wooden poker table over here. This poker table will be a substantial upgrade for the recreational needs of our two colonists. As you can see here, it has a recreational power of 161%, which is far more than any other recreational activity our base currently has to offer. For a price of just over 400 silver, it's also not too expensive, so let's spend that money and get some gambling going in the base. Now, the small problem here is that the poker table is a 2x2 item, so it takes up quite a bit of space, and inside of a common room we don't really have much to begin with. Still, that is the one room I would like to put it inside of, so we'll have to do some clever rearranging. Okay, here we are, this is how things look now, and no, this is not blocking any path, it simply looks pretty ugly, but it's still functional. It does, however, provide just enough space to put the 2x2 poker table in the top left corner, conveniently enough also with access to the chairs, which I believe should still work no matter which way they're facing. So, poker table installed, now we only have to wait for it to be used. However, with an eclipse striking the ice sheet, Cambiar decides to increase his recreation need by meditating, so it takes a few hours longer until late in the evening he finally uses the poker table for the first time. And here you can also see how fast the recreation bar is rising. That poker table is definitely going to be a very useful item going forward, even though at the moment it makes the room a tiny bit crowded. And look here, Cobra also gets a taste of the new entertainment, and so just like his recreation need, our base is definitely moving in the right direction. And so with Cobra now repairing a broken solar panel that I once again received no notification for, I would like to slowly wrap today's episode up. Yes, the whole power situation is giving us a few troubles, so if you have any ideas on how to fix that, let me know in the comments, but overall I'm very satisfied with the way things are developing. Now, before we leave the ice sheet, I also want to say thank you and give a quick shout out to all the new patrons who have joined since the last time. The Pete Complete Patreon is growing steadily, and I want to take this opportunity to thank a few special individuals for their support. So a thank you goes out to Anon, to Ayrton David Logan, to Jason Fisher, to Andrew Robson, Ilana Silverman, Andreas Bonini, Andrew Cook, Vicente Sosa, Jordan Willie, Jackham, Sunshine, Pietro G, Joey Shepard, to Madeline Duggan, who gave a name to one of the Husky puppies last episode, to Doran Lazar, Roman, Thomas Huff, Joe in Madrid, Michael Smick, Michael Martel, Darklight, Francis, Connor Albright, Hexner, Adam Work, Miss Spite, Louise Leon, Pepper Winter, Lucas Bonfant, Henry Garza Jr., This is Giraffe, Brian Bird, Setsin Erden Gambantar, Mikola Lysenko, Oshin McColgan, Chris Lovelock, Ictus, Zaxard, Marius T, Alexander Hernandez, Anaka Unknown, Flamian Lion, Connor McGee, and to the latest patron who joined just yesterday, Carl Pereira. Thank you all so much for your incredible support. No matter how much you pledge, it really means a lot to me. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Once again, it took me a while to get it out, but I wanted to wait for version 1.0 to be released to give you a first-hand look of the admittedly minor changes that came with the update. So if you liked the video, then I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel further, then you can either subscribe if you haven't already, or of course you can also check out and maybe pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.